You don't look tired, and the flow looks good, Mark. Don't worry.
Flow's gone.
Good morning. What is something perhaps that you learned about Clayton Kershaw as his pitching coach versus something, that you didn't know perhaps when you were the bullpen coach?
Um, Honestly, I don't know. I think I had a pretty good feel for the type of worker, and I don't mean necessarily like how hard he works, but just kind of his routine, how he goes about his days in between starts, how he kind of lets his guard down in between starts. And then obviously, like, it's game time, today from the moment he arrives. I don't think there's anything necessarily new. Our I guess relationship is evolving, currently, and I'm trying to get a feel for him, his in-game adjustments, things that he wants to be talked about or maybe said to him. Maybe those are things that I'm learning, like things that how he wants to be cued, or simple reminders in the moment that are very simple, but maybe provide enough impact for if he needs to make adjustments. So I think it's more of some of the in-game type stuff that I wasn't necessarily privy to, just obviously being in the bullpen versus being in the dugout.
Right. He had said after his last outing, continuously this year when he's hit 92, 93, 94, that he knew it was in there, and it was frustrating because it wasn't being seen. But this year, for whatever reason, the velocity is back. What do you make of that?
I think I read some of the same things. I think he's it's not about the work, but I think he's done a lot of things to access, say the velocity that, has always been there. And over time, as we get older and he puts more miles on his body, pitching, like things start, the body starts changing, things start tightening, things start loosening. And so I think he was able to, do some different things and kind of attack it, from a 360-degree approach, to unlock some of the body to allow his arm to deliver the velocity that, he was accustomed to. And I don't think that's anything that's unusual for veteran pitchers, especially guys who've been around for, a decade, to go out and have to kind of, not learn something new, but kind of figure out, where their body is at, in their 30s than it is at their young 20s. And, he spent a lot of time trying to figure out the right steps and the right things to do. And right now he's seeing the dividends, in the velocity and really the command too. I think, you take away the San Francisco start, but going back into summer camp, you see him being able to command both sides of the plate, much more effectively. And then I think that's something that he had also lost too. So there was a velocity component, but it was also a little bit of the command on both sides.
You guys are going to have some decisions to make coming up. I know Gonsolin was optioned yesterday. It makes sense. He's not going to be able to do anything for a few days anyway. But with Alex coming back and the way that Gonsolin and May have performed, I realize it's a good problem to have, but where do you see that going when Alex does come back?
Yeah, good question. Don't know. I mean, I think it's something we discuss internally. It seems like we're discussing somehow every day at some point, whether it be a lengthy one or just a quick, short one. I'm just, I think we as a group are very happy with the way Tony and Dustin have, basically answered the bell. D-May getting thrown into that first start for a guy that was getting sent down out of summer camp. And now he looks like he's definitely earned his way into this rotation for the time being. And I think the challenge to Tony was, given that his slow start in summer camp, we always had told him, hey, like, you're going to be a part of this. We just don't know when and how. And the challenge to him was basically go out and basically, compete to win a job, show us that you deserve to be here. And he has. And, I think that's a good problem for us to have. It's, it's not necessarily the easiest thing for the player who's performed, but that's part of also just, I guess growing up in the game a little bit. There's just some things that, you have to go through that not necessarily fair, but it's just part of it. But Tony's taken it like a pro, and we need to keep him stretched out as a starter. So this made the right, from a logical standpoint, it was the right decision. And we expect him back and really to provide a lot of impact for this ball club when his time comes again.
Appreciate it, Mark. Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, Mark.
Morning.
Morning. I was curious what the organization's pitching strategy was as far as handling of the starters and the pitch counts. Stripling and Kershaw in a couple of different starts have gone 91 pitches, 92 pitches, respectively. At least in the first month of the season, was there a conscious effort to limit the starts of your starters?
No, I don't think so. For me, I think, limiting them would be more in the 60 to 75 range. I think Clayton, I don't think it was any secret just based on summer camp. There was no limits on him, and especially Strip and Kirsch and Woody before he went down. I mean, those guys were in pretty good positions to kind of hit the ground running, and that was something we had communicated to them all during the shutdown. Kirsch went into the seventh inning at his last summer camp start. I think his limits have been more because he had that setback with his back and just trying to get him back going. And Strip, from his standpoint, has pitched well, and it just got into a situation where we felt like as the lineup was turning over again, most of his times have been, that seemed like a logical spot to insert a reliever. So it's not necessarily has been a limiting thing. It's been more just, I guess more of a strategy thing and where's the best spot to interject, the first guy out of the bullpen.
As far as Walker Buehler goes, do you feel like he's getting closer to be the Walker Buehler that he was after the first month of last season? And do you see any similarities between his first 5 starts last year and the first 5 of this season, first 4 or 5?
I think he's getting closer. I don't think he'll tell you probably the same thing, that he's not exactly where he wants to be, but I do think we've been seeing progress over the last couple starts. First we started seeing the velocity tick up a couple starts ago. I think last start we saw the command tick up. The breaking ball stuff, the slider and the curveball haven't been there for him yet. And so that's kind of handcuffed him in some situations where he hasn't, he's either wanted to throw it and it hasn't got quite the bite that we needed. And, he's paid the price for it, or it's just has been balls, which then leads right back to kind of more of a hard pitch. But I think things have been trending in the right direction. I mean, slow start. I do see some similarities to last year, but I think there's some things that are different. But not working ahead, in his first few outings didn't help his cause. But I think now we're starting to see things, slowly, like kind of piece by piece put together. And Walker's, got a guy who, has some moving parts. And I don't necessarily mean from a delivery standpoint, but there's a lot of things to get him to where he feels, confident in everything. And with a guy who's, featuring, 5+ pitches sometimes to lock all of them in at one time is, those are the games where you see the 15, 16 strikeout game. But I do think we're seeing progress, and the goal for obviously Walker's to get him right, but obviously get him right for the stretch run. So as long as we keep seeing, steps in the right direction, I think we're encouraged. And then obviously Walker will go out and compete and gives us, a great opportunity to win every ball game that he's in. So we still feel very good about that. But he's progressing, not where I think everybody would like it to be right now, but I still think we feel very good about where he's at.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark, just wondering, we're talking about the spots, Wood coming back, Gonsolin. Why not just go to a 6-man rotation when you have extra roster spots in this short season? Hello.
Oh, there we go.
You hear me now?
Gotcha.
Okay, cool. Just wondering, we're talking about Gonsolin and Wood coming back and the number of spots in the rotation. Why aren't you guys and other teams just not going to 6-man rotation when you have extra roster spots?
Fair question. I mean, I think during this stretch of 17, that was the reason for, dropping Tony in there for 2 starts, is to kind of go with the 6-man rotation. But then after we get out of this 17-game stretch, we got some off days that actually is going to, limit the ability to do that. We're guys, if we went even with our 5-man rotation, guys are going to get pushed in 5-6 days off. We want to keep Kirsch, and Walker and those guys kind of somewhat of a normal schedule. But I mean, that was basically some of the decisions. We didn't feel that we needed to necessarily go to a 6-man rotation at the time being. Does it make sense if your schedule dictates it, like the last 17 games? I think it does. But we felt pretty good about the 5 guys we have, and then taking the extra arms in the bullpen.
And we're talking about Kershaw's velocity. What does a mile per hour and a half? What does that do for him? I mean, like, practically speaking, how does that impact his his pitching in any way?
I mean,
obviously throwing harder is better, but how does that impact him?
Yeah. Hard sometimes is good. I think it just gives him some margin for error. I mean, the balls, when he's throwing, with that extra velocity, it gives him some margin for error in the zone. He does have still has the life on the ball through the zone. He still has kind of that rise that gets through the zone. And then when you add a couple, a mile, 2 miles on it, it just gives him a little bit more oomph. But I also think that it allows his slider to keep the velocity and the break on it. I mean, it's obviously the slider for him is a short, and it's good. It's hard and it's short, and it basically just misses barrels. So I think that's the other, component. Now, there's the velocity the same on the slider, even when his velocity is down, is, sometimes it is, but I don't think the movement and the sharpness of the bite is the same. So I think that's kind of the extra benefit, or the added benefit is, yes, it gives him some room on his fastball, but I think it also helps him lock in. The arm speed helps him lock in his really good slider.
And we've seen Victor Gonzalez a couple times. Just what have you seen from him going back to training camp?
Yeah, I mean, for Victor right now, it's really, with his stuff and his movement, with the fastball and the slider, it's really just how can we keep him on the plate consistently. I think where he started off slow last night is, he was just getting off the plate. And that's really, for our standpoint, what gives some hitters a chance. I think if he throws it over the plate, and just allows his normal run on his fastball and then the sweep on his slider, I think we feel pretty good that the ball is going to be put on the ground, or there's going to be some swing and miss. And I think what we saw in the second inning was the guy who was, kind of settled back in. And I think when he maintains his delivery and kind of the normal cadence of his delivery without trying to do too much, we see him over the plate, and it's a lot of ground balls, a lot of uncomfortable at bats, and Victor's going to help us. We don't know how or when or what the situation is, but we feel very confident in what he can do. And I think for him, it's just the more he gets out there, I think the more comfortable he'll be, and so it won't be such a maybe some overthrowing from the initial pitches. But Victor looks great, and he's got obviously got a high ceiling and a lot of upside.
Thank you.
Next question from Ken Kearney. Go ahead, Ken.
Mark, the starters in general have been going shorter this year than last year. Do you think that's?
Well, now I got you.
Okay. The starters have been going shorter this year than at this point last year, this many games through. And I'm just wondering if that's because you've got a younger rotation, a shorter ramp up, or is it just performance related?
It broke up. I think you said starts have been short. Is that a performance?
Short ramp up, or
gotcha.
The fact that you've got younger starters than you had last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably every situation, meaning every game, is probably a different decision. I guess from my perspective, like when we go into starts, I think we're like shooting, for like normal starts, which is like 90 to 100. I don't think we're going to push guys over 100 right now, just because I don't think we need to with the extra arms in the bullpen. I guess some of the times we look at it more from a game standpoint, like how many frames had they pitched? Tony getting in the 7th the other day, and so it was for him. His pitch count was down, but we felt like 7 innings was good enough, and he did his job. And I think that's a little bit more of, maybe the mentality is like, what is that guy's job on that given day? And if we feel like that he's done his job, that's probably when we'll decide to make a decision. Like, I felt awful. Maybe awful is too strong of a word, but, I mean, we're conscious of D-May the other day in Anaheim. 4 2/3, like, we had a decent lead at the time, but obviously against that team, we felt like, we didn't want the situation to unravel where, he lost the next guy, then he's facing, Ohtani and where things can snowball really quickly. We felt like on that day it was a hot day. And so that was like more of a game specific decision, to flip it right there. And again, it was a standpoint where we felt like, knowing who we had in our bullpen and, what was the right place to interject somebody, we felt like that was the time. And so, so again, it's more necessarily like it's not necessarily a preconceived, like we're going to keep our starters short from the ramp up standpoint. It's more of, what's the job on that day? Has he done it? And who's next up? And where do we feel like that entry point best suits that person to keep the ball, keep, kind of momentum on our favor and keep it rolling.
And you mentioned May in that game. Is it tougher to kind of balance that, a balancing act, and not burning out the bullpen when you've got so many young starters and they're not giving you 6, 7, 8 innings the way like the Maedas and Ryus might have done a year ago?
Yeah, no, I mean, right now it's a delicate, there is definitely a delicate balance, being able to, try to bank, so to speak, 6 innings, give or take an out here or there, is not always the case, because they are young and you don't know from a consistency standpoint, you get Dustin in San Diego and that how lights out that was. And like, he was pretty efficient, or even when it first started in San Francisco, he just hadn't got, built up as much as we would have liked. Or is it more of like a grind where it was in Houston? And even the other day in Anaheim, it was a grind. Like, he didn't have his cutter working, very good offensive team, hot day. So like, that was more of a decision of, trying to put all those, factors into the decision. But it does make it more challenging because, starts like last night, starts like on Monday, do put a lot of strain and taxes your bullpen, even if you do have extra arms, because you're actually going to carry a lot of outs. So, I think now as we start getting through this stretch, we'll start seeing, hopefully some guys pushing into that 100 mark, when it's appropriate. But again, it's going to be a game by game decision based on, what's going on in the game.
Thanks, Mark.
You got time for one more. Go ahead, Pedro.
Hey, Mark, can you hear me? Do you have any sense of how hitters' lack of in-game access to video this season has affected your pitching staff, I guess specifically your starters? And are there ways they have or can take advantage of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, it goes both ways. Yeah, I mean, obviously I've heard rumblings of the ability not to kind of see where pitches are and, have a good feel of maybe, the movement of what a guy's throwing versus what it says on paper or what they've seen in film. And so I do think like there has been like an impact from that standpoint, but it also is from a pitching standpoint. Like, we have no access either. So it's really hard to see, like, we're relying on our eyes from a dugout, is the pitch in or out. We can kind of tell some vertical stuff, if it's up, if it's down, but it's really hard to say, is the cutter moving? Is the slider moving? Like, is there any, how's the sink on a 2-seamer? Like, and so, we're flying blind a little bit there too, and really, trusting what our catchers and what the feel of the pitcher is at that time. And I'd say a majority of the time, like, we get pretty good reports, but at other times, like, they're in the heat of the moment. So it's hard for them to completely, like, be impartial to what's going on. So the in-game video has made it a little bit more challenging from that standpoint. And, it's trying to make in-game adjustments without being able to see just the standard TV feed, has been limiting. And it is something that is definitely, forced guys to adjust, coaching staff and players both.
Do you think you can correct for it over the rest of the season, or, being 4 weeks in, have you found ways to sort of course correct in games, or do you think it's just sort of, you're going to have to take some occasional L's with your understanding?
I think it's both. It's definitely, getting, I guess, our pitchers and our catchers both, like, to make sure they're, hypersensitive to what's going on in the game and being able to, be intuitive, like read and react. I mean, a little bit of it's, I don't want to say it's old school, but there is a little bit of read and react. Like, hey, if something's not working, we're trying to figure out why it's not working in the moment. We got to make an adjustment if it's switching from the game plan. And I thought that's what, like Tony did the other day. I thought Sammy and Tony, or Austin and Tony, sorry for the nickname, did a really good job. Like his split, he was throwing it, but it wasn't as good as it was, the previous start that we had seen. But then all of a sudden, that fourth inning, like they realized, like, hey, his fastball had gone to a different level and really leaned on it. And I think those are the adjustments that we need to see out of our battery. And it's great if we see it, from the dugout, but it's way better when they see it in the moment, because then they can make those adjustments a lot quicker than we can. We have to wait until maybe an inning's over, if the catcher's hitting and, they got a lot of things going through their head. But if they both are seeing it in between the lines, that's where I think the impact is huge.
Gotcha. And that was Austin who suggested that in that moment the other day?
I think it was just, I don't know exactly. I think it was just really Austin being like, wow, that was different. And then all of a sudden they just were like synced up, and those are the moments that, when sometimes it happens in the first, but a lot of times it doesn't happen until the third or fourth where something clicks and they both know it and they just, started going. I mean, in that one at bat against, I don't know if it was against Long, or somebody, where it was just like he just let it rip, and it was where it was like 96, 96, 97, 98, and it was like just by the guy, and he knew it was coming and he'd let it have it. So that's when it's awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everybody.